John Broker. I'm with MUSC
Ah.
Sustainability here.
Oh, fine.
Yeah, I was just
I get your emails all the time.
face with the email.
Yeah.
I was going to talk like 5 slides about what we do to save water here at MUSC and conserve it. This is the main thing, which I think is pretty cool. It's called a performance contract. And this is like big high level thing where you get an outside vendor to come improve your energy and water efficiency to save you money. And they get paid based on the actual performance and the savings there. We had one in 2009 here at MUSC, and these take multiple years to start and then actually to implement. But they saved $2.5 million in annual savings with energy and water. We're currently in the process of a new performance contract here at the university, so that can be up to all 130 buildings that we have. And just to kind of dive into that, there's a lot that they do, and it goes really, really in depth. These are kind of just some fixture type of things that you can do that they'll come through and they'll put in low flush toilets, urinals, flow restrictors, low flow shower heads, all sorts of things to conserve water. Also, obviously, you have your leadership in engineering, environmental design, and we have the LEED Gold bioengineering building, and then the Sean Jenkins ... building. That will be
So the two new
it's
buildings.
so long.
The two new buildings, bioengineer and drug discovery, kind of qualifies as green buildings.
So they are LEED certified gold. Actually, it's just bioengineering building that I know of. And so there's a plaque when you walk in, and we do tours of it occasionally, and they have things like low E glass that restrict the amount of sunlight, the heat from the sunlight that enters, so you get the light but not the heat. All sorts of different things like that you get points for that qualify a building as LEED. And it's not just in energy, it's in all sorts of things related to sustainability. And then landscaping, our groundstorm does a really good job here. So it's good to give them a shout out. They have sensors in the ground that measure how damp it is and timers. They water at night for multiple reasons, native and drought hardy species, rain gardens and bioswales, and they put in the drains to ocean markers on campus. And the last slide I have is just what you can do to save water at MUSC, and the obvious stuff of just not using as much water, turn the faucet off when you don't need it, but then also reporting leaky faucets, toilets, anything that's leaking on campus. People don't know that you can call that number. They just go, oh, oops,
That's probably a huge issue. I never thought of that.
oh no, definitely.
Yeah.
That happens with energy too.
Yeah.
Things will just be broken. Like, oh yeah, the light never turns off in there. It's been like that for 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, so know that number. That's all facility issues. That's if your light bulb goes out. That's anything.
Yeah.
And then I think a big one is just following your hazardous waste protocols, especially if you're in a lab. And the number for safety is 23604. So I'm sure there's always things in labs that you're like, this is right in the gray area. But think about what you're putting down the drain, because then it goes to Plum Island, and they only take out certain stuff. So like what you're talking about with like persistent organic chemicals, there's not doing anything with that at Plum Island, which is just right across the water.
You know what's funny is the discharge point on that too. It's like real close to. Everybody thinks that discharge is right up in here close, but it actually is about 1,000 feet off White Point Garden.
So you used to be able to
You
see
send it
it.
over there, they treat it and send it right back.
You can see it.
Yeah.
I think they've updated it since then, but the old Google Maps, you can actually see like the little spouts coming out.
Yeah, you can see the. Hi, Christine. You can see the. It's a 7-head diffuser, so it is, and you can see it's still there.
Oh,
I don't
really?
think they've upgraded it recently, as far as I know. How do I make those? Is there like a play?
Yeah, so it's in the bottom. I can help you. It's right.
Or you can hit view slideshow.
View.
It's right here where it's.
Going outside?
Is
Carrie out there?
Oh, here?
I believe so.
How's that?
We,
Okay.
no,
All right.
I didn't give her that.
Oh, great.
She said
It's
she might need
it's been a while since I
Yeah,
used
yeah.
a PC. I'm almost completely, and I'm not a huge Mac fan, but I just had one for work and I've become dependent on it, on the Steve Jobs way of doing things. So, well, thanks, Jonathan, and thanks for having me. We already got talking about some really interesting stuff. So, my name's Andrew Wonderly. I'm your Charleston Waterkeeper, and this will just kind of give you an overview of the organization and kind of the full scope of sort of what we're doing. But please don't hesitate to stop and ask questions. So I'm not going to get much out of me if I just stand here and drone on. So the more we can do, especially with a smaller group, the more we can do discussion, I think the better. So And of course, right, this is what Charleston's all about in a nutshell, you know. Enjoying our local waterways. So, you know, what's a waterkeeper? Right? A waterkeeper is an identifiable person who works for and speaks on behalf of local waterways. Typically, waterkeepers are sort of part scientist, part lawyer, and part educator. And so we fill all those different roles in the community, working and tackling various issues. But one of the most important things about a waterkeeper is that you have a physical on-the-water presence. We don't have that boat anymore, unfortunately. We raffled it off as part of a fundraiser, so we only got to use it for about 6 months. So our mission is to protect and restore your harbor, rivers, and tidal creeks so that you can fish, swim, sail, paddle, take pictures, do whatever it is that you love to do without fear of getting sick. We're a small organization. We have 3 members on staff. So there's Cheryl, who's our water quality scientist, our education coordinator, our volunteer coordinator. She also makes sure that we stay on track with our newsletters and our communication. Cheryl wears a lot of different hats. She's a graduate of the Master's of Environmental Studies program over here at the College of Charleston. She also does all our laboratory work for our water quality monitoring program. I'm the kind of goofball in the middle there. I'm the director and the waterkeeper. All the advocacy work, working with the board of directors, the fundraising, the organizational management. And then also, I'm the one that has the unfortunate responsibility that every time the news calls, I'm the one that has to have the microphone in my face. Not my face. If you ever want to know what you sound like, go get yourself on the local news. It's not that fun. And then this is Captain Herman Miller. He's our pump out boat captain. And that's him on the number 2 there, our pump out boat. He's a part-time employee and he works exclusively in our mobile pump out program. So he services. And actually, we'll talk about that a little. And that's Cheryl up there at the top, pulling a sample from James Island Creek.
What's a pump out boat?
The pump out boat is, you know what a marine head is?
Marine head.
Yeah, so a toilet on a boat,
Okay,
right? After you use it, there's a handle next to it. You pump the contents of the bowl into a holding tank. That holding tank has a Y valve. One goes overboard right into the water, and the other one goes to a deck fitting. And so what you can do is, you know, obviously we'd love for you to do the right thing. All you have to do is call us. Herman comes out in the number 2, connects to your deck fitting, and then
so
sucks
it deals
the
with
contents
waste off of boats.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
It's a dirty job, but he somehow manages to look good when he's doing it. So, our jurisdiction is the Charleston Harbor watershed, which isn't actually a real thing. There's no such thing. But it's easy, you know, the particular mentality of Charleston is that we're the center of the universe, right? So keep the peninsula right here. The big joke is that the Ashley and the Cooper Rivers come together to form the Atlantic Ocean. I don't know if anybody's ever heard that one.
No, it's the first time.
Yeah, it speaks to I think it speaks to Charleston's unique mentality. Excuse me here, guys. Yeah. Well, they can wait. So we've got the Wando River, the Cooper, the Ashley, and the Stono, the 4 main river systems that are kind of connected to the harbor in some way. The Stono shouldn't be naturally, but through the Elliott Cut and Wapoo, it has a connection. So that's our jurisdiction. That's the areas where we work. It's basically the tri-county area of Berkeley, Charleston, and Dorchester counties. But of course, we also do the work on behalf of the community. I've never experienced a place like Charleston where, you know, everybody has 1 foot in the water and 1 foot on land, right? I mean, whether it's fishing, sailing, paddling, surfing, you know, or just sort of enjoying, you know, an afternoon walk in Shem Creek Park, folks love the water, right? And there's a lot of water keepers in their communities have to work to build connections between their community and the local river or the local, you know, whatever it is. Here, we get to start at square 2, right? You know, people have a real strong connection to the water, which is really important. Now, that's changing, believe it or not, right? And so let's talk a little bit about what some of the issues are that we're working on and what our program is designed to address. Aggressive growth, right? As people move in here, the people that move from other places don't have a full appreciation or a full connection to our local creeks and rivers and harbor. At least to, you know, threaten tidal creeks and wetlands. Those are the areas of first contact between land and water. Plastic pollution is a big one. Of course, sea level rise. Polluted floodwater, right? Everybody's familiar with the idea of polluted stormwater, right? So when it rains, picks up the pollutants, washes it into the
water.
Well, we're trying to change that conversation a little bit and get folks thinking about polluted floodwater, right? You see folks running around and playing in the flooded streets. That is the dirtiest water that you could possibly ever come into contact with. Another big one too is in a conservative, quote unquote, business friendly state, and I use that term a little bit facetiously, but because I don't subscribe to the idea that sort of business and environment need to be at opposite ends of the poles. But we see very weak environmental oversight and regulation from our state regulatory agencies. And then of course this one keeps rearing its ugly head: offshore oil and gas drilling. So we'll kind of walk through what some of those mean, right? This is, the Charleston area and the Tri-County areas and the fastest growing counties in the country. The whole Nexton and Somerton and all that up in Upper Dorchester County are looking like, 60 to 80,000 new people over the next 30 years. I mean, they're essentially creating a whole new city in the space of, 20 years or so. Which is really amazing. This is Gadsden Creek downtown. This is where West Edge is going. I don't know if you all hear about West Edge a lot here. I know MUSC is a partner in that project, but they're actually proposing to fill in about 4 acres of tidal creek and marsh to put that development on top. We are really involved in this with the development team and everybody else, and we're hoping that
So is this Citadel in the back?
Yeah, so this
Yes,
is
So where is this?
this right here is Haggett.
Oh,
and this
this
is Fitchburg.
so
This
this
is
is right by the
parking is
music?
like-
yeah. So
So that's Summerall in the back.
That's right
Yes.
behind Harborview Tower.
Yeah. Oh my
Harborview
gosh.
Tower. I was going to say Ashley.
I
Yeah.
thought that was on the other side towards Mount Pleasant side by the aquarium field, like upper, but I see now where we
West
are.
side.
There's, believe it or not, 4 acres of tidal creek and marsh right there. It goes right through. All that land used to be the old Charleston landfill.
Oh, really?
And so it's a really, really interesting history that we can get into a little bit later on. But these types of wetlands, right? It's certainly a degraded tidal creek system with about 4 acres of marsh surrounding it are the first place that land and water, and these are sort of the canaries in the coal mine, if you will, for environmental impacts to the larger system. And I think we as a community need to respect them a lot more than we do. You can see some signs of garbage. That's actually a mattress. That little white
Yeah.
fleck up there is a mattress, believe it or not. Plastic pollution. The plastic pollution that you see is almost exclusively convenience items, which really drives me nuts, right? It's plastic bottles and bags and food wrappers and all that kind of stuff. But there is some evidence too that it's coming through the waste stream, like with some of the microfibers. There's a particular type of like cornflake-looking black particle too that they find up near Daniel Island quite a bit. That's some research coming out of the Citadel right now. Polluted floodwater, right? So this is the Charleston City Marina. This is a supporter of ours, Jared Bramblett, who's also a photographer and a stormwater engineer. But this is tidal inundation during a normal high tide, sitting on top of, and you can imagine what's underground at a gas station, right? It's all those underground storage tanks with gasoline and whatever else. So. And again, polluted floodwater. This was after the October floods in 2015. This picture really shows, that's oil, grease, gas, everything coming off the street, coming off the cars, and everything else. This is up in Shadow Moss. And then this is a nice article from a few years back by Sammy Fretwell in the state. Nearly 25% of the businesses that have environmental permits are routine violators, meaning they frequently violate their permits over and over and over again with little to no enforcement, which is really a shame. That's a very high percentage of folks violating, which I think really highlights the lack of strong enforcement that we have. And of course, we all know what's happening here with offshore oil and gas. The Trump administration has directed the Department of the Interior to reconsider the Obama administration's decision to remove the Atlantic seaboard from offshore oil and gas leasing. And so we're going through that whole review process again. We wouldn't have had to do this for another 5 years after the Obama administration decided to do it, but we're going to have to fight it again just after the first round. So that's what happens. Elections have consequences. And so,
Do they ever consider that we sit on an earthquake?
no, yeah.
I'm like, what
I
would
have
you
not heard
drill?
any debate about that. Yeah,
I'm like,
and like Oklahoma and I think it's
Fracking.
Oklahoma, right, where they frack and they experience all those earthquakes.
right.
And there's a pretty clear, I'm not sure that I'm using the right word, correlation right, between the relationship. I'm not sure what the appropriate statistical term is, but from what I understand, there's a strong correlation between the fracking and the increased frequency of earthquakes. So I don't know why that wouldn't be a similar issue here if we're doing sort of that drilling work.
What I can't figure is they have extensive requirements for geological studies whenever you drill for oil, but for fracking, what the frack?
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's, and the thing that really scares me is that, once you let the oil and gas industry into your community, they
If
just.
they're a political hardball player, they'll kill you.
Yeah, right, and you look at the landscape around Houston, and then you look at the landscape around here, and it's really, the threat of catastrophic spills is an issue, right? But, those are sort of, once in a generation events. It's the onshore and attendant infrastructure that comes along with the oil and gas industry.
Pipes through the marsh and all that.
Pipes through the marsh, canals, refinery capacity, all that. Where's that gonna go? Where, and you hear it's like, oh, Georgetown wants it, they need jobs. There's so much protected land around Georgetown, and there's just no good place for it in South Carolina. We don't need it. Our coastal economy is booming from tourism. I don't see any advantage to it. And so this slide real quickly just gets at the way we protect and restore, right? We're a data-driven organization. We're hands-on, which we feel is reflected in this kind of notion of boots on the water. We work to educate the public, we work to engage the public, we're active on issues, we're collaborative, and we like to teach this idea of stewardship, right? We get back to that hands-on idea. We're not sort of passive about the issues that we take on. We are on the water, there's a physical presence with almost everything that we do, whether it be oyster reef builds or cleanups to water quality testing. We like this idea of education through experience and that sort of thing. I think in the next couple of years, we'd like to start heading that way and more and more, where, we're not just in a classroom talking to a group of middle school kids. We have those kids, out helping to build an oyster reef. We have those kids out doing cleanup, and we're talking to them about plastic pollution and that sort of thing. So you're building, through the activity, you're building the educational opportunity and hopefully creating sort of teachable moments. But I think that's a little different from the way a lot of organizations, especially here in South Carolina, operate. So, we're, the idea is to be closer to the people that, benefit from the work. And of course, always, we always strive to be a data-driven organization and take issues.
So what's your relationship with the mayor? Because I've been emailing him and he emails me back with this love story by email.
Yeah.
But when I ask him, are you going to put a cap on aggressive growth or extreme development? He's really like, no.
Yeah.
He says we need to embrace it, and
I think we need to.
Well, he's tried to do it at city council, which has said no.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. We're still a democracy.
I think he's right in the sense that we need, you can't stop growth and growth, right? That's not good for
but
anybody.
isn't he the one who, I don't understand how it works, but
He was swept in, I think, sort of on a message of livability and like getting back to,
doesn't he
good
have
for the
to
people of
approve
Charleston.
the new developments?
The mayor doesn't, no. The city,
Council?
so it depends on where the project is. It's not always the city of Charleston, right? So the city of Charleston is pretty well built out. Like there's not a lot of new sort of developable land.
Except
Yeah,
for
but
West
what are they
Ashley.
doing to downtown? It's insane.
So what you see going on in downtown is increasing density, right?
And they build these tall, huge apartments building that are ugly
And so generally, so we don't get involved in like the scale and the form and that sort of size, but generally from a water quality standpoint, density is good, right? What you don't want is gobbling up new land for development. That creates impervious surface, that affects your floodplain, creates flooding, puts more pollutants in the water. What you want to see is dense urban cores.
the development is bad for the water.
Well, be careful. If you don't mind my kibitzing just a little bit, the terms of reference, which you need to think about in terms of conversation with the city, is not pretty and ugly. But, I'm just being realistic because the city has pretty much signed off the idea of densification. And the idea environmentally is that with per capita loading, you can get more people in there, which they need for their tax base, with less pollution per person when you aggregate them. But the countervailing principle, which they never really think about, which I think we need to define more effectively, is what the carrying capacity is. What are those systems which are at the brink, especially in storms,
Yeah.
but are at the brink, whether it's water or sewer or
Yeah.
runoff
Well, I
or
was-
whatever. And then
Yeah.
focus
I
in
know-
like a laser on the carrying capacity of the receiving water body.
Especially with stormwater, I don't think we're considering that very well at all, right? You know, I think the water and sewer infrastructure is a little bit ahead with that. They're pretty well, I mean, they're very in tune to development, where it's going, providing capacity. There's some mechanisms.
Water supply,
Water supply and sewage and sewage treatment capacity.
right, but in
Right,
terms of the
yeah.
rest of it.
But in terms of stormwater, I think you're exactly right. Like they're you know, the prevailing wisdom, a few contacts and colleagues that work in stormwater engineering and work in that space. And what they're finding is that, you know, they can't do anything progressive here, right? Atlanta, Charlotte, DC are all doing really neat, progressive, you know, low impact design, green and blue stormwater infrastructure. You know, a lot of that's all happening in other places. And what they tell me is that we're about 20 to 30 years. It's still about bigger pipes, bigger pumps, you know, and that sort of thing. And that gets back to the Gadsden Creek issue, right? You know, the city, MUSC, and the South Carolina Research Association, who are partners in that project, you know, the development team that they've chosen to do that just looks at Gadsden Creek like it's a dirty ditch and it needs to be filled in, when really it has, you know, it has a number of ecosystem services. Does it flood? Right? Yes, but you know, you can't cap capacity through pipes and expect it to fix the problem. You know, that's where we are, sort of mentality for the work.
My
that's being
personal
done.
solution is forget the city, forget the other cities. We need to form what Atlanta has, an Atlanta Regional Commission that monitors water
Yeah,
for the whole area.
yeah.
So it needs to cross the 65 different municipalities and county governments and be able to deal effectively with the resource.
Yeah. So there's water, like regional water quality planning happens through the Council of Governments, but it's not robust at all.
Like the rest of the
It's
things
very
that happen through the Council of Governments, it's not at all robust.
So,
Yeah. There's a mechanism in place for that sort of collaboration, right? Like it should sort of happen at that level, but it's just, it
so
just doesn't.
again, what's your relationship with the city hall, I guess?
Yeah.
or-
It depends on the issue. I don't think they're very supportive of us on the Gadsden Creek issue, but on the plastic pollution issue, we've found some support with a lot of council
Yeah,
members.
he was pretty on board with that.
He's very aware of the problem of plastic pollution. We've had direct conversation and direct contact about that, so, it depends on the issue. And, you know, the difficult part is you gotta remember that with the exception of the mayor, the council members, you know, don't have professional staff. And they rely on folks like us in the community to educate them about issues and why they're important. So hearing from you about why you're concerned about plastic pollution, what the research you're aware of, and the research that you're doing shows, I think goes a long way.
So you suggest instead of emailing him constantly, I should email all of the council members constantly, and maybe that will.
Yeah, I think that's their
I
job
know
is to hear
one,
from
he's
you.
actually my old
Yeah.
landlord,
Do you
so
have a council member? That's the person who's going to be responsive to you. Who
The
represents
most
you?
responsible.
I don't even know,
You need to
Where
find
do you
out.
live?
okay, I
Where
live
you live,
West
where
Ashley
you're
by
from.
Home Depot.
Right, so you need to find out which council
Ah,
member
okay.
I
just
think
go
that's
up
Bill
on.
Moody.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably.
Moody?
She's mine too.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. I actually have somebody who's running
He's-
against her, Susan Ferlstein, and I'm trying to support her right now, so we'll talk.
Susan, I think would make a great candidate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you interact with them often? and-
Yeah, as often as we need to based on the issue. I don't randomly call them on a Friday night and see what's.
No, but I guess my question is, do they also come to your event, you know, is it,
The mayor's done cleanups with us, yeah. He
Okay.
was at a cleanup in the Marshbeck Mine, California agreement with us, which was really good because you can't come away from a cleanup experience and say we don't have a problem with plastic.
oh
Well,
yeah,
that's also his
that's for sure.
backyard, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all of this is designed to put the Federal Clean Water Act to work for us right here in our community.
When was that passed?
The Federal Clean Water Act was passed in the early 1970s and implemented to varying degrees for various components of the act. You know, where it's implemented to various degrees over the years. Some of it more strongly than others. I think where a lot of the implementation work is happening right now is with stormwater. We sort of got a handle on those point source discharges. But the thing is none of this works without strong community support. And I can kind of walk through how we do it. I think the best example of it is our water quality monitoring program. So Clean Water Act requires that you set standards for water quality. that you then, for all your local waterways that support uses like swimming and shellfishing and fishing and all that sort of thing, then that you also do the science, right, to determine whether or not those waterways meet the water quality standards that you set for them. And then if they don't meet them, the Clean Water Act has a mechanism to clean them up. It's called the Total Maximum Daily Load Program, which is a terrible acronym, and all it means is a cleanup plan, right? But then the implementation of the cleanup plan falls on the community and the local municipalities where the waterway is located. So DHEC, state of South Carolina, does a great job of setting water quality standards. For a number of years, did a pretty good job of the science, but then, as you might imagine, as we became, through the 90s, really, after the 80s, the science drops off, just almost disappears. Where they were sampling every month, they're sampling now. I think some of the most frequent sampling you do is every other month. That's 6 data points out of a waterway in 1 year. I mean, it's just really not enough data. It's not even enough data to reliably calculate their own water quality standard. So we said, okay, we're a community that loves to get in the water, recreate in the water, so we're going to do the sampling. We're going to do it at a high level, so they have to accept our data as regulatory quality. The program is fully certified and approved by DHEC. We use a college's laboratory. We work to get their laboratory space certified so that we produce really high quality data. And so we go out 15 different sites May through October and sample bacteria levels. And as you can see, Shem Creek's a great example of this too. They hadn't taken a bacteria sample in Shem Creek since 2011. Right, we started sampling there. We do 3 sites May through October to capture the recreational use season, and we do it every week. Right? And so, in 2 sampling events, we have as much data as they had for a year, and so you get a much higher degree of resolution. What we've done then is take that data, leverage the data with DHEC, and get them to appropriately prioritize these areas for cleanup plans. And so we're working with DHEC, the town of Mount Pleasant, on a plan for Shem Creek. We've also just started the conversation with the municipalities around James Island Creek, which is right here. Those are 2 of the dirtiest creeks in the Charleston area.
Say again, which one?
James Island Creek and Shem Creek. We see very high bacteria results out of those waterways.
So when you have a red flag, how do the community know about it?
So we maintain an email list so folks can sign up and get the email. We also publish it on social media.
Okay.
And then a lot of times the local news channels will pick it up as well. But it's frustrating because they pick it up when it's convenient for them. So what'll happen is we'll get a lot of coverage of the results for, let's say, like a month, usually towards the beginning of the summer. And then sort of it wanes as they feel like they've told the story. It's been hard to get them to pick up on the routine thing. My dream is that, when you see, Dean Stevens on the news or what, I forget what he's for, Channel 5 or whatever he is, he's like, oh, look, here's your, just like the weather, right? You got the weatherman doing, here's your local water quality. So that's
Is that sheet available somewhere?
yeah, so you can get this online, or if you come see us at an event, we have an actual, hard copy.
Andrew, at these places, are there any maybe community boards or anything else where you guys post the current result?
Yeah.
Like right where the entrance to the beach or
Right where the
something?
access
I don't know if
points
they want
are.
you to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they meant.
We're working towards that. As you might imagine, Mount Pleasant, really makes a living off of Shem Creek.
Yeah.
And for them, if there were like red flags flying every week, they haven't fully they're funding engineering work to the tune of about $100,000 right now to understand better what the stormwater inputs and where and how they're impacting Shem Creek. We're hoping to have the results of that study wrapped up in October, and then to try to formulate a plan of action from that. So
Rather than throwing a red flag up.
the public has a right to know, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's totally clear. We've been strategic about how hard we push Mount Pleasant because they've been a really good partner in this. And, when I don't feel like I'm getting good, honest cooperation at some point, we'll start to employ tactics that are a little bit more direct.
So when you get the report and it's red flag,
Mhm.
does the City Hall, Mount Pleasant and Charleston know about it?
Yeah, so their
'Cause then
their folks are all on our list.
This is their responsibility then,
Their folks are all on our list, yeah.
Okay.
So theoretically, you could advertise in the paper saying, before you go swimming out at Folly,
Check
you
results.
check results, and people would do that, and they would choose not to go there.
Yeah.
But you haven't done that.
We don't have a budget big enough to pull
Oh.
advertising to the Post and Courier
That
yet.
would be kind of an interesting thing to do.
We can barely afford the city paper right
There
now.
was an article
Maybe,
back
maybe it
in
could be
July
considered
about that,
community,
right?
We have had a lot of good press coverage this year, and actually, I think, this was from 2016, but, you know, this is some of the press coverage that comes out of it in the newspaper, right? This project solely got billed as a water quality project because of the work that we're doing. And that's, you know, that's to the tune of $18 million. Septic tank, some of the contribution to the bacteria levels is gonna be from septic tanks. So, you know, you can get an idea of the sort of coverage we get, right? We get coverage of like that, you know, that really scary story. I think that's the last one I had, that's where I'm on the pump out program. We had another couple articles that looked at the variability in the data. So, you know, a high result during a dry period is here, a high result after a rain period is way up here. I mean, sometimes like 10 to 15 times the standard for safe recreational use. I mean, so we get some astronomically high results. But you know, we've been fortunate to get quite a bit of good press coverage, especially this year on the program and the work that's doing. It really helps raise awareness. There was some local news pieces too, like in the local TV news and that sort of stuff. But here, let me bump on real quick. Marine pump outs, we talked about this a little bit. That's the number 2. You can see the thing, the suction nozzle that
You call it number 2?
Yeah, it's our second boat. I'm kidding, yeah. And then that's Herman, you know, hard work kind of gives you a flavor of it. All you have to do is call us, we come out and service you. We also, this is just a quick hit of the discharges, right? These are all point source discharges, right, to the Charleston Harbor.
And where is that?
What does that mean, the discharge?
Where's that printed?
Yeah, so this is directly from our website.
Okay.
And so we can use the Freedom of Information Act to get all the discharge monitoring report data, and we can look and see whether they've been complying with their discharge reports.
I'm sorry, so those dots represent?
Discharge.
They represent just discrete conveyance that puts treated wastewater into your creeks and rivers.
A pipe. A pipe.
They all have, through the Clean Water Act, limits on the types and amounts of pollutants that they can discharge, right? And they're required to also do routine sampling to determine whether or not they're complying with their own permit. Right?
So this is not sewer, this is not.
Some of those could be municipal sewers. Some of them are like the paper mill. Some of them like BP or DAC Americas, which is further up the Cooper. DuPont's up the Cooper.
So it's supposed to be treated before it reaches.
Yes, and it has to be treated to permit limits or better.
This does not include stormwater discharge.
No, these are only, well, so that's an interesting, like that's where it starts to overlap, right? This does not include the municipal MS4 permits. No, that's another flavor of permit. These are just the individual permits on individual facilities. There's a whole other class of permits out there too for industrial stormwater that this doesn't cover. That's where this program's going next, is into industrial stormwater. We also get out on the water and patrol when we know of an area that needs to be documented, and then we report the conditions to the appropriate authorities and hold them accountable for appropriate actions afterwards. That's bread and butter waterkeeper work right there. That's a little more realistic of the boats that we operate rather than the first one. We also have a really active volunteer corps, and shout out to Cheryl. And actually there's Mary Tecklenburg or Cheryl in there too. So, but this is just the routine sampling kind of stuff that we get out of creeks and rivers, all manner of garbage and material. Charleston has a dirty secret. Our marsh looks really pretty and healthy, but when you get down in there, it's full of trash and debris and garbage. And then we also, that's kind of active programmatic activity, ongoing program work. We also stand up the threats against, that threaten your clean, healthy waterways. And so we talked a little bit about Gadsden Creek. You know, you can see that this is, despite it being degraded, is really a remarkably healthy marsh ecosystem right in the heart of downtown. And you can see what the original, this is, what a completed west edge would potentially look like. And then you have the creek up there that's essentially turned into 5x8 box culvert, right?
But they would have flooding issues, right? These people need to.
So the other dirty secret about this is the city wouldn't even include the stormwater drainage from the West Edge project in their drainage plan because that area is so low.
It already is a nightmare by federal credit union, like a high tide, just that.
On B Street there, yeah.
Okay, well,
So that's an interesting issue. We've got them to appropriate, at first they weren't even looking at this like it was public trust highland, and we got them to appropriately classify it, which means that for any impacts they do have, they'll have to mitigate elsewhere, probably at a ratio of, I don't know, maybe 2 to 1 or so. So if we do end up losing the full 4 acres here, we'll get 8 acres preserved somewhere else, which I think is really important. I'm not sure how that one's gonna play out yet. It's still.
So would that be in the nature of reconstructed wetlands or?
Yeah, if, we would want, salt marsh for salt marsh, right? A lot of times these mitigation things, you end up with freshwater. It's really weird because there's not a lot of saltwater credits available. But that's a bottom line thing for us, is that if we're gonna impact salt marsh here, we need to have salt marsh somewhere else, and as close by as possible. And so, there's some opportunities directly on site, there's some opportunities around Turtle Neck Park, there's some opportunities further up the Ashley. All that's still in play right now. Of course, plastic pollution, right? And I always point this picture out. Dart Manufacturing is one of the biggest manufacturers of styrofoam. It's also a plastic product. He stood up, their lobbyist stood up. He just happened to be in town when the city of Folly Beach was considering their styrofoam ban along with plastic. He just happened to be here and decided he'd pop in for the evening at City of Folly Beach City Council meeting when we're working with them to ban plastic and plastic bags and styrofoam. He said that there is no evidence that styrofoam degrades in the environment, and that once a cup would essentially be a cup forever, and that it doesn't sort of shed into microplastic. This is what we see routinely with styrofoam, right? This looks like the surface of the earth, that it sort of crumbles into these tiny pieces in your hand. This is another thing that we find really frequently, these foam packing peanuts. They're always green and they're always the S-shaped ones. They're coming from somewhere and I just don't know where. Just almost routinely, we'll see them in certain parts of the Cooper River. And then of course the ubiquitous plastic bag. I'm sure we're all aware of that. So we work with local communities that are interested in taking action to limit the amount of this stuff that's available in their communities to end up as litter. But we also work to defend the rights of those communities from out-of-state lobbyists who are pushing a preemption bill at the State House, and that'll come up again here really early in 2018, that essentially takes away the right of local communities to make any law or ordinance that deals with an auxiliary container, right? And an auxiliary container is a paper bag, a paper box, a plastic bag, a styrofoam, any of that. It's so broadly cast that it's almost unconscionable. So that's a little bit, and then of course, I'm sure some of you all are aware of this, some of the research that goes on with plastic, and there's microfibers, and we see these little black weedy flakes up on Daniel Island. It's a bit of, most of that's coming through the waste stream somewhere, but I think as a community, we need to rethink our relationship with these convenience items. They're really, it's a shame that we can't use them more responsibly and make sure that they get recycled, obviously, but even before you get to recycle, right, you get to reduce, reuse, recycle, right? And so, we're really focused, obviously the recycling efforts are what they are, but, I don't think we can focus enough on reduce. Obviously, we're gonna be battling this one pretty good again. There's an effort in Dorchester County to remove protections remove coastal zone protections for the headwaters of the Ashley River. We're doing a big event to bring the Ashley River community together to sort of protest that to celebrate the Ashley River, but also to shine a light on this effort.
Who is
October 8th. Chris Murphy, Representative Chris
who
Murphy.
is trying to get rid of those regulations?
Representative Chris Murphy from Dorchester
So they want to
County.
remove
Coastal zone protections for the Cypress and Wassamasaw swamps, which is up
It's about
sort of to the west of Somerville. Yeah.
above 165.
Yeah, above Bacons Bridge Road. Everything above Bacons Bridge Road would be removed from the coastal zone, which is a shame because, as we all know, if you wash your car, you don't wash your car from the bottom up, right? You wash it from the top down. If the top's clean, everything else will be clean afterwards. And so, they're proposing to protect the Ashley River, but the language around it's really weird. They propose to protect the Ashley River and love the Ashley River, but want to remove protections for its headwaters, where all the water comes from. So we encourage you all to sort of get involved, and we encourage folks to get active, get engaged, and support. This is a volunteer. We take really strict data in the cleanups we do, so that we can quantify the types of amounts of debris that's coming out of our waterways. Would love to have you all to clean up. This is an oyster reef field we did with Nature Conservancy. Linda's a volunteer field investigator. She's been trained up in her sampling protocol and has to demonstrate proficiency every year before we start sampling. You can see all those opportunities at our website under the Get Involved section. That's a little slice of our website there. You can see the Get Involved across the heading. Sign up for a newsletter. I'm a little biased. I write the dang thing, so I think it's pretty good. You can let me know otherwise. I'm always open to hear it. And then, of course, get active. When we send action alerts, contact your legislator. They listen to you, believe it or not. And the plastic bag example is our local rep on James Island, Peter McCoy, really stood up and made a big difference for local folks on the plastic bag issue. I mean, they listen and they listen really well. And then, wait, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. Lost my keys. And then, of course, we will always appreciate your support. There's a nice bright little blue button at the top of the webpage, so you can't miss it. We literally could not do this work without the support of people like you. Our funding base is largely made up of average folks giving a little, and it really makes a big difference in us being able to perform this work for your waterways. So really appreciate your time, and thanks for listening, and happy to entertain any questions. I know we probably ran a little bit long. We got talking.
You're right at once,
so,
they're good.
Yeah.
I will throw it up, yeah, so I think she has a question. If you
Oh, yeah.
want to know about
Well, it's just that it's been brought up already and I was late.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
It was just about this thing with Erin Brockovich and the water.
We were talking about that
What's the
earlier.
deal?
Yeah.
Can we drink the water?
I drink the tap water,
Uh-huh.
and here's my little piece. I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't, know how you determine cancer clusters, but I think sort of intuitively, most of the drinking water in the Charleston area comes from Charleston Water System. Mount Pleasant supplements that a little bit with groundwater that comes and then goes through a reverse osmosis plant. So they probably pull the majority of their water from Charleston Water System and then mix some of their own water with it from the reverse osmosis plants. If the drinking water were what was causing those cancer clusters, I think you would see that all over. You'd see it in West Ashley, you'd see it in North Charleston, you'd see it on James Island, you'd see it downtown. There is, however, I think a very, very legitimate debate to be had about what's in our drinking water, how often do we test for it, what's it doing to us, and all those sorts of things, right? The general sort of concept is called contaminants of emerging concern, and those are things that we can test for, right? But sometimes we do, sometimes we don't yet know what the health effects are, right? Like we know that there's PFOS and PFOA in drinking water, right? What we don't know is at the amount that it's in drinking water, is it impacting public health? And that's where I would flip the switch back on you all. Like, let's see that science, let's see that data, and make folks like us, make the advocates aware of it, and then we can drive the policy changes that'll better protect public health.
When compared to other cities, how is the water in Charleston from the water system?
It's a difficult comparison.
It's a tough question. I know a lot of the guys that do the drinking water work, and I don't think we have a situation here like Flint. Flint was an absolutely extraordinary case. People will go to jail. Ultimately, I think maybe already have been convicted, right, for what went on in Flint. The folks that I know, there's what you hear from that community is that, hey, we can treat drinking water to any level of cleanliness you want it, but we as ratepayers have to pay for it, right?
So are the city of Charleston, they have to be careful, they still allowing you to submit water samples from your tap for testing?
That I don't know.
They used to, and if it showed up high in lead, they would replace your service line.
Yeah.
And what
I've
they've
heard
done, huh?
I've heard of that, I worked over
Yeah,
at
I've done
college.
that, in fact.
For lead.
Yeah, for lead, and that's the main thing. But they put a chemical in it which coats the lead so that it doesn't bleed or leach back into the water. However, anytime there's a disturbance, of course, then you're exposing the lead to the water, and that's an ongoing concern. It's not dealt with, but there's a tremendous amount of lead around. If not on the city side of it, then in all the lead solder on your individual pipes, inside your house.
My house was built in '53 and has all copper pipe, and I'm sure it has leaded solder.
Yeah,
That's a really common thing. It's not common anymore. I guess the larger question is how concerned should you be, right? And I think I drink the tap water. I drink it unfiltered. there's easy things you can do at home with like Brita filters and that sort of thing. And, or
The
if you have
Brita
a
filter does not filter
Yeah.
important.
It won't filter a lot of the more exotic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
it's gonna
have a
take care of
2-year-old
the
and I
basics,
invested on a $400 reverse osmosis system at my house. I do not trust. They do not test for everything. They don't have the money actually to test for everything. But pharmaceutical that you take, you pee, goes to the water treatment. It does not treat the water for pharmaceutical removal, and then it goes back in the system.
So you want to know something really weird, right? Is we're not drinking our own pharmaceuticals. We're drinking pharmaceuticals from Colombia,
You're right.
right?
But we are at the
That's
end
right.
of the
Yeah.
river. Yeah.
Yeah. So our drinking water supply comes out of Lakes Marion and Moultrie, goes into the there's a canal that then sends some of that fresh water down into the Bushy Park Reservoir where it's collected. So.
Well, in that regard, the biggest single issue that concerns me related to our drinking water is trying to make sure that the leachate from Pinewood is being properly monitored. That's a big issue. And then I was taking a train back over the summer and took the trestle there right below the dam and looked back over and didn't realize that, what is it, Santee Cooper has their power generating facility there is actually coal and not water. There's
Okay,
a giant
you want me to really blow your mind?
coal, pit there right next to the Tail Race Canal.
You want me to really?
What is this?
So there's a couple of generating stations, right? The one that one's shut down and is not operable.
But they still have the
They've-
tailings there.
Well, they've removed a lot of the coal ash.
Have they?
there. Yeah.
Thank God.
I don't know if they're done all of it, but they've done quite a bit of it. It goes to be recycled into concrete. It's an additive in concrete.
Well, that's good.
The one that's the bigger concern is the A.M. Williams generating station, which is further down, right? And so the Bushy Park Reservoir is an old tidal creek called the Back River.
Right.
And it was a tidal, sort of tributary to the Cooper River, ebbed and flowed with the tide, just like the Cooper does. It's brackish water, right? Not quite, not quite fresh, not quite salt. And so in the 50s, for a long time, Charleston pulled groundwater, like shallow groundwater, shallow aquifers for drinking water. It wasn't very high quality, it tasted terrible, right? And mixed with, all the septic tanks and what was called a privy ball, which is essentially an outhouse. But anyway, they dammed up the Back River, turned it into what's called the Bushy Park Reservoir, cut a canal or a channel in it, and diverted fresh water after it goes through the Panopolis Dam, comes through the canal, fills up the Bushy Park Reservoir, right? Well, it's just a big stagnant pool at that point, right? And so without any flow through the dam, it just sort of backs up and gets stagnant and grows algae and all that sort of stuff, right? So the A.M. Williams generating station has what's called once-through cooling technology. It's the old technology that every coal-fired power plant had for a long time, and they suck water out of the Bushy Park Reservoir, run it through it's a closed cooling system in the sense that it doesn't contact anything else, runs through there, doesn't contact sort of processed water, right? So it's not like mixing with coal and all that stuff. It's running through pipes and cooling down machinery, goes through a little bit of treatment, and then gets discharged back into the Cooper River, right? Well, new EPA regulations came down, right, that required, and the problem with that is it traps fish and it sends a thermal discharge into the Cooper, which is unnatural. Fish get trapped and trained on the intake equipment, and it kills a lot of fish and all sort of things. So EPA wants to get rid of these once-through cooling systems. New regulations come down from EPA. SCANA's going, well, okay, we got to comply with this. We got to comply with it at A.M. Williams. What happens is Charleston Water System gets wind of this and realizes that there's not going to be a really big volume flow anymore. Once they install this closed loop cooling system that just recirculates the same water, right, there's not going to be a flow through, and they're going to have stagnation problems in the drinking water reservoir. So the quality of your drinking water in the Bushy Park Reservoir depends on the once-through cooling flow of a coal-fired power plant. How weird is that, right?
That's the balance of nature.
It is a terribly poorly engineered system, right? It is an awfully engineered system, and it's just all plumbed and fixed. So what happened is Charleston Water System and SCANA got together, sort of petitioned DHEC and EPA to hold off on enforcing this regulation while they were able to work out some deal. Really, the ultimate responsibility, I think the ultimate thing that needs to happen is they need to put a flow through at the dam right, which would solve some other problems that I'm really interested in too, namely that the boat landing at Bushy Park silts in really bad, and a lot of the fishermen can't get in and out up there through all the tides. And so if they had some flow through the dam, that would, return some of the normal channel to the back river and whatnot, and would also reduce reliance on the once through cooling water from A.M. Williams. The problem with that is it's like, approaching the billions of dollars in order to fix. And so it's not something we're gonna fix overnight or over time. That's a bit of a nuanced issue, but it blows my mind that somebody had the bright idea back in 1950 to put a coal-fired power plant right next to our drinking water reservoir.
Yeah, it does blow my mind too. So
That was off the deep end there. Any other questions?
No, that was
it
good.
was right after your question about drinking water.
Yeah.
That was also.
That said, though, I still do drinking water. I don't know if it's affecting my health.
Is bottled water a better option?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I
No,
don't know.
Tell me about
No.
mine.
it's
A
not.
lot of the time it's.
I mean, you've got leachate right from the plastic and all that sort of stuff, and who knows where? I mean, who knows where Dasani water's coming from? It's probably a tap in a
They don't
warehouse.
filter it any different, they just package it for you.
Yeah.
And then the BPA from the plastic or the BPS that they replace BPA with,
Yeah.
nobody knows about it, will leak into it, and so it's still.
Is boiling the water a good option?
That
I
would
don't
take.
think
get
it
out.
takes
That will
out
get rid of your
pharmaceuticals.
hops.
So it's
Don't worry
really,
about
so
that.
what is it filtered?
You boil for bacteria.
Reverse,
Mhm.
yeah.
Reverse osmosis is
Is
going to
the
be the
best.
Cadillac of water treatment at the home
Well,
level.
like you said,
Yeah.
it's like $400.
Well, it's a one-time investment, I'm
Yeah.
probably saving in bottled water or whatever, because I
Mhm.
never bought bottled water anyway.
Yeah.
And
Is it
I have
something
a
you put
2-year-old.
on the sink?
yeah, it's under my sink, and then I have a little faucet. And you can install this for your whole house if you want to shower and everything, but I just did my
Yeah,
faucet.
just to drink.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am?
Sorry, I came late.
Yeah. No.
But for a Broke College student, is a Brita filter, that,
That's an interesting. I've always understood that they work pretty well, but I would lean on some of the
Thank you
experts.
so
Bye
much.
Thanks. Yeah.
I guess it's better than nothing.
Right.
It's not like-
I think that's the better than nothing.
Okay.
I think activated charcoal will do a lot, and I think that's what the Brita technology is based on. Is that right? It's like a
Charcoal based,
filter. Yeah.
which gets out a lot, but not everything.
Not everything.
Better than drinking it straight from the tap.
So, the question is, I mean, like I said, I think, you can design a treatment system that can produce almost perfectly clean water, but the way we fund our drinking water infrastructure is all through rates, when you pay your bill to Charleston Water System, part of that is for, part of that goes to water treatment. And so how high a rate will the public support, and where does that fall with clean water?
Yeah, because you don't think about that. When I
yeah.
pay my bill, I'm like, oh, God.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's
Yeah.
$25. Are you kidding me for
Yeah.
clean drinking water
Yeah.
coming out of my
Right.
tap? That's ridiculous.
Well,
And it's hard to justify like treating all your water, because like you said, you don't
So,
shower in reverse.
We, a long time ago, made a really weird decision, right? With how, so we, this gets really weird, right? I'm gonna get kind of gross for a second. But, back in the 1800s, there was a debate about how it was better to handle, sewage and human waste from houses. And there was two competing systems. One was a dry carriage system, which is just what you think it is, like sawdust and kitty litter type, stuff that, you would have to deal with and, and that sort of thing. But, really could be done, I mean, there's even composting toilets nowadays that some people use and that sort of thing. And the other one was what they called the wet carriage system, which is what we have, right? So we take, I don't know what, a gallon, most toilets are about a gallon, maybe a little less now. You take a gallon of clean drinking water, right, and use it for waste. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why don't we have really, really high quality water coming, two sets of pipes, right? One for the waste, right, and one for the taps. And then maybe even a third one that, comes off your roof for taking a shower.
That's just too smart.
Yeah.
That's just a good idea.
I mean, the fact that we, use clean drinking water for waste
Yeah,
is
we
just,
waste so much.
that water in your toilet is treated to the same standard as the water that
Yeah.
comes out of your tap.
Well,
And that's a waste of money.
gray water systems are required in Florida, I think.
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't know. I know, like, one of my dreams is to sort of replumb our house and have
Certainly some
rainwater and
sections
all
of
that.
Florida.
If you guys want to see an example, have you ever been to Leon's?
Yeah.
Oyster
Yeah.
and Poultry, they have a very small gray water system where it's when you right after you flush the toilet, water starts running, that fills up the toilet tank that it's used to flush it. So,
Wow.
if you go there, you can see it, but
That's
it's
neat.
just one toilet.
Yeah. So
Very small.
this, you know, this brings us back full circle. I mean, that kind of stuff just doesn't make environmental sense. It makes dollars and cents, right?
Mhm.
And I think, you know, your first slide, what was it, 2.5 million or something?
Yeah.
Or 25 million? I can't remember what the
The
number
2.5
was. Right, and savings.
per year, yeah.
That MUSC has realized, you know, from water efficiency efforts is huge. And that's real money.
Yeah.
From water and
Right.
energy, yeah.
Yeah. From not really complicated things either, right? It's, you know, it's just being smart.
Even like setting up the flusher in your toilet to have your water level lower, like
Yeah.
saves on water.
Yeah.
Save money.
Well,
It's very
yeah, there's
interesting.
lots of different approaches. When I lived in Bermuda for several years, of course, we lived on water collected from the roof.
Yeah.
And so everybody was eminently aware of how much water they were drinking. Because if you ran out, that was it. You had to wait 3 weeks for a water truck to give you maybe 1,000 gallons, but it
Yeah.
doesn't last very long.
You know, the hottest shower I ever had was in Mexico. It
Yeah.
came from a black tank on the roof. Almost burned it.
Well, toilets used to always have bricks in them to keep the amount of water down.
Yeah.
The water was always mineralized. The pipes were so small, it was like taking a shower with a, you can imagine.
We're used to the luxury of that.
You know, it really
It's just
is
a problem.
terrible. I mean, and then there are little signs crocheted on the wall of the bathrooms I thought were really kind of unique. They said, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But collecting water from the roof,
That's
like
what,
they do in the Caribbean, to go, this is genius, and we can put the toilet on this.
You want me to blow your mind again? Is Charleston Water System isn't, or hasn't always been the friendliest to water conservation efforts, right? Because the more that you conserve and the more rainwater that you collect, right? The less they can charge for. So the way it works is you're not charged for how much water comes out of your house in sewage, you're charged for how much water comes in, right? And so there's a meter on the inflow, not on the outflow. And so they charge you sewer based on the amount of water that you bring in. And so if you're collecting water on your roof, right, and they're not charging for it, right? It's essentially you're sending it, and so there is some truth to it, right? You're sending them extra volume and capacity to treat after you've used it that you're not paying for, right? And they're real sensitive to that. That doesn't mean that they're against it. It just means that, they haven't quite jumped into that with both feet. I think maybe is the
They
best way to
actually give rate reductions to people who use more.
well, that's right. If you use more water, you pay less per quantity.
Really?
Right, and you'll look on your bill, I
Your
think it
volume.
says.
And there's
the
a
first
flat-
X number of
Your
gallons.
volume
Yeah.
is
There is a flat rate at the beginning, right?
Right,
No
and when you
matter-
go over that, it's less.
Yes.
Yeah, they started that in the early 90s. I read a letter to the editor, just,
Yeah. I'm gonna bring that up again. I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully the public's a little bit more aware now.
People care.
Well, so if
You'd hope.
we would like a follow-up, or for example, one of my classes or something.
Yeah,
Is it possible to contact somebody?
Yes, so Andrew at charlestonwaterkeeper.org, or if you go to the webpage, scroll to the bottom, there's a contact us thing.
And is there,
All that comes to me too.
thank you.
That's one of my other hats, is triage and all new incoming.
Is there another, is there an opportunity to participate at least, or maybe even just to look over your shoulder while you're doing water
You have a
quality
cleanup
testing?
coming up.
We
On
do
the
have a couple of
16th.
cleanups coming up, yeah, the big one on the 16th. But so we take what we call them VIPs on the boat to observe the sampling work. There's a limited number of spots left. We're getting pretty close to full for the rest of the season, but just shoot me an email and say, hey,
We've
might
got
have
7
it.
students, so trying to see.
I can't get 7 on the boat all at once.
Right, no, you know, different,
Yeah.
their schedules were
But
not
we could
allowed.
get them 1, maybe 2 at a time, depending on how it went. The other thing we could do too is you could just have them meet us all at a specific location. They could see one sample go down, and we could talk about how we do it.
Yeah,
That's
that
one
would be
option.
good, that would be good.
Yeah.
There's also a exhibit going up at the College of Charleston Library dealing with these issues in November, I think, or maybe.
As part of Sea Change with the Halsey.
Well, no, it's actually part of the QEP program,
Oh, okay.
which is something they're doing this year to support water issues.
Yeah.
And so, might be interesting getting a pile of garbage from you that stick out there.
So we work with a couple of artists who do installations, basically. We drive around with an automatic trash in the back of our cars. So Vasiliki Falkenhag has an installation, I think it's still up at Redux on Upper King now,
Oh, really?
which is really neat. And then Kim Thomas is the other woman we've worked with, who built these big totem poles out of plastic debris that we found from different cleanups and stuff. And so we could easily provide a bag of trash. You just have to come get it from us.
Yeah,
I don't like driving around with it very long.
See what the library says.
You got quite a Charleston teacher? Oh, nice.
You guys, I want to give Andrew a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all.
And we'll